Because we tend to have this picture of the hierarchy of the way that it is. So most of us, or at least Sharon and I, grew up thinking that the main reason for blood sacrifices was atonement for sin. And that wasn't it at all. It was a dedication, giving over, reliance, worship of God. So tonight we're going to look at the next one that the Bible lists in the order that it lists it, but it's more important than something that it is following after. Does that make sense? It is subject to the one that we're going to study later. Because the value of it in relationship to God is higher than the one that is the prequel of it. Make sense? It's kind of one of those, which is more important? The engine of your car or the tires of your car? That was a question. See, class, we talk, there's dialogue. Huh? You have to have both. Okay. And so that's kind of where we are. But first, let me ask you, around your house, Richard, what is Thanksgiving like? We're talking the holiday that comes in November in the United States. What is Thanksgiving like? I'm sorry, lots is eaten? Is that what you said?
A lot of eating.
A lot of eating and conversation. Mary? Same. Cooking, okay. Cleaning, cooking, getting ready, okay. Now, let's think about that for a minute. Do you ever have company? Ever have company from out of town? Ever have company from out of town? Do they stay with you? Do they stay with you? No. They stay with her. Okay. No. Okay, so anybody else here around the holidays, Thanksgiving, it could be Christmas, but right now Thanksgiving, have company that comes and stays with them? There's another one, there's another one, there's another one. Sometimes. Okay. So, tell me, which is more important? The eating? The conversation, fellowship time together? Or the prep work and getting ready, including the cooking? Which of those is the most important? Richard likes the conversation. I obviously like the eating. Okay, you do those at the same time a lot of times. What about all of it? Okay. Would you feel comfortable having guests, your daughters, whoever, come into your home, stay for a couple of nights, and have this big celebration if you did not prepare? If on Thanksgiving Day you got up and you said, oh, hey, I've got some golden chick food over in the fridge, just get it out and we'll have that. Why? That's not Thanksgiving. So what does Thanksgiving look like around your house? What kind of food? Okay, and that's actually the perfect answer. Special food. You have food at Thanksgiving that you don't necessarily have the rest of the year. Why? More of a celebration. People have Thanksgiving shakes. We're special. Some people have Thanksgiving shakes. But we have special food because we're special people at a special time where we have a lot of good food usually, by American measures a lot, which means by world measures a lot. And we also have this fellowship because a lot of times we're surrounded by family. It's a special time that we have marked as a holiday, right? But back to the idea of which is more important, the Thanksgiving meal or the planning, the prep work, the cooking, the guests, all of that? Which one's more important? And the answer is, well, you could eat turkey just about any day of the year, but you don't because you have that meal with this close group of individuals, right? Leviticus chapter 3, please. So if you would, remember that during the first couple of offerings we looked at, one of them you brought an animal. It could be it had to be a perfect animal, and it had to be of a certain age, no defects. You would bring it to the temple. You would place your hand on its head. You would thereby effectively say, this animal is taking my place in this sacrifice. It's dying so that I don't have to. The animal would be burned up. The blood would be sprinkled on the altar. Why would the blood be sprinkled on the altar? Without blood, nothing's forgiven. But now, during the first two sacrifices, there was nothing to be forgiven. Those were just sacrifices of worship. But it was this idea of atonement, which again, we have our whole life spent thinking of this idea of sin separates us from God. So when sin is forgiving, we are at one with God, and thus the word atone, at one. And so typically in our mind, we think of sprinkling of blood being the blood of atonement being sprinkled on the altar, that brings us at one with God. But in truth, those first sacrifices, it is the sprinkling of the blood of atonement, but because of our reliance on God, we're recognizing that as first importance, that our reliance is on God. And so you had this atonement, but it wasn't for the forgiveness of sin. Okay. It was. And later, we'll see that is its very specific purpose. But through the first couple of sacrifices, it has been that. That brings up an interesting point on this one. And by the way, during the first sacrifices, everything was burned up, nothing was left over. Correct? Totally devoted to God. And it represented us and our devotion to God, that we are fully given over to God. But now we have something called the fellowship offering. So, tell me what fellowship is. Jet, haven't picked on you yet. What's fellowship? I'm sorry, I'm deaf. Gathering together. Yeah, no, and maybe. Because, you see, in our culture, that's the way that we take it, that's the way we mean it, and that's the way that we use the word. But to them, the idea of fellowship was different. So, Tina hadn't picked on you. What's fellowship? Gathering together with people. Well, that's what Jet just said. And it was a good answer in our society, but we're talking about Bible society. So, Toya, what was fellowship? Gathering together with like-minded people. Again, we're getting to this idea of being together, but in this instance, in the instance of the Bible, literally what it means is same life. Symbiosis, if you will. So we have the same objectives, the same thoughts, the same desires, the same goals we're working, and it doesn't mean we're necessarily all doing the same thing, as we have all of this in common, so that if together we were rowing in a rowboat in the middle of the ocean, we are the people on the oars. If the boat sinks, we all go down. If one of us is rowing to go that way and one of us is rowing to go that way, we're not going to wind up where anybody wants to go, so we better get a plan together to go the same way. And that's the idea of fellowship. Now, the fellowship offering, Leviticus chapter 3, is not with my fellow men. If it's not with my fellow men, who would it be with? God. So, how can I have fellowship with God? Okay, community, communion. And this then we're going to see is going to very closely resemble this, but it's not the same. It's going to very closely resemble what today we use the Lord's Supper for, but there are differences. So, let's just read Leviticus chapter 3, and then we'll get back to it, and we'll see where we go. By the way, some stuff to know going into it. The people that offered the fellowship offering could only offer the fellowship offering if they were in right standing with God. So nobody who was a habitual sinner caught in sin could offer the fellowship offering. That was an abomination before God. Nobody who was not an Israelite could offer a fellowship offering. They were an outsider. They did not have covenant relationship with God. And because of those two things, almost always the fellowship offering had to be preceded by the sin offering. Because the sin offering was what brought about the forgiveness of sins to restore you to fellowship with God. Better do them pretty quick in succession, and a lot of times they would, but the fellowship offering was very much like our Thanksgiving celebration today. Except it wasn't just once a year or a particular day on a calendar, but it literally was a time of feasting together in fellowship with God, because our at-oneness with God, our relationship with God had been restored. Therefore, if He's the king, what kind of a meal is going to be fit for a king? Bologna sandwich? The best, a feast. And so literally this is going to wind up a celebratory feast with God to be eaten only in the temple. Okay? So let's go. Chapter 3 of Leviticus. New International Version. If someone's offering is a fellowship offering, and he offers an animal from the herd, whether male or female, he is to present before the Lord an animal without defect. He is to lay his hand on the head of his offering and slaughter it at the entrance to the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall sprinkle blood against the altar on all sides. From the fellowship offering, he is to bring a sacrifice made to the Lord by fire, all the fat that covers the inner parts or is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the covering of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons are to burn it on the altar on top of the burnt offering, that is, on the burning wood, as an offering made by fire, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. So, first thing, you're bringing this perfect animal, you're putting your hands on it as the substitution, you're slaughtering it, you're killing it. Then, as you butcher it, you're taking these organs and the fat and you're putting it on the fire to burn. But let's keep going. If he offers an animal from the flock as a fellowship offering to the Lord, he is to offer a male or female without defect. If he offers a lamb, he is to present it before the Lord. He is to lay his hands on the head of his offering and slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's sons shall sprinkle its blood against the altar on all sides. From the fellowship offering, he's to bring a sacrifice made to the Lord by fire. Its fat, the entire fat tail cut off close to the backbone, all the fat that covers the inner parts or is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the covering of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made to the Lord by fire. There's something different. So you take the fat of the animal, plus the kidneys, the liver, you put them on the altar, as opposed to the earlier sacrifices, you would put the whole thing on the altar. Now it's just part of it. So tell me, when you fix a hamburger, do you want any fat mixed in? Why? Flavoring. If you don't have any fat, you don't have any flavor. Correct? Might as well be eating shoe leather. It's holding it together. And the same thing, the less expensive cuts of steak are things like your sirloins, and your more expensive ones are your things like your ribeyes. And you know the difference in them? The marbling, the amount of fat. So what you're doing here is you're taking the flavorful part of the animal, which we also know is not healthy for humans to eat now. They didn't necessarily know it then. You put it on the altar, and now every time before that there was an offering that said it will be a pleasing aroma before the Lord, now it says something different. Now it says it will be a food offering to the Lord, because the picture is literally the Lord, the King, is eating this meal with you. This is His food. And if you look throughout, there are probably 20 different places through the rest of the Bible where it mentions this is the food for the Lord, or this is something along those lines, the meal of the Lord. Okay? Verse 12. If his offering is a goat, he is to present it before the Lord. He is to lay his hand on its head, slaughter it in front of the tent of meeting. Then Aaron's son shall sprinkle its blood against the altar on all sides. From what he offers, he is to make this offering to the Lord by fire. All the fat that covers the inner parts or is connected to them, both kidneys with the fat on them near the loins, and the covering of the liver, which he will remove with the kidneys. The priest shall burn them on the altar as food, an offering made by fire, a pleasing aroma. All the fat is the Lord's. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. Wherever you live, you must not eat any fat or any blood. Okay, so now, there were some differences that we've seen, right? But when we get to it, there are other differences also. And because the point of the lesson is not going to be caught in these details, may I have your permission to kind of skip through them and give you the highlights? This is yes, this is no. Okay. If you think I am wrong, or if you want me to give you book, chapter, and verse, stop me and I will. But unless you do, I'm going to just hit the highlights and move on to the main point I want to hit, okay? So, in Leviticus chapter 3. On any of them. On any of them. Right. Right. And there were some differences in the wording on there. For example, with the goat, it said it is the food for the Lord and a pleasing aroma. And that then has two different aspects, because remember, the pleasing aroma that we looked at from the first two sacrifices shows our reliance on God. But this food for God shows that God is going to be celebrating this with us. So it's this pleasing aroma to God because our full reliance and our full dedication is this way. But now, instead of it just being a one-way relationship, there's a fellowship coming in also that brings peace. And the peace then, if we look through other scriptures in the Old Testament, the peace is with us this way, but it's also this way. So, if I'm at peace with God, I'm also at peace with my wife and with my family. Now, I'm at peace that if I go out and I die in a car wreck on my way home, that I'm okay, because I haven't got unfinished business or things that I'm still upset about. So, this... Oh, very much. Very much. And remember, this was almost always preceded by the sin offering, so there has been atonement. So now we... Yes. Yes. But in Leviticus chapter 22 is where you can find some more information about the peace offering. Richard, would you stand up for a minute and bring your Bible? The front shoulder of the animal you would take, And you would, as the sacrifice person, you would hold it in your hands. And the priest would put his hands on top. So you've got it here, he's got it here, and you move it toward the fire. And then you bring it back. And you move it toward the altar, and you bring it back, and you move it toward the altar, and you bring it back. And then the third time, this part is given to the priest. It's his. Then you take the lower quarter and you hold it the same way, except this time you lift it up. And then you lift it up because God's here. And you lift it up, and after the third time, that part's the priest's. Okay? And it was very specific what parts were the priest. Thank you. And they would do that together because, number one, it represents you and your involvement, your willingness to give it over to the fire, your willingness to give it to God, but also your reliance on an intercessory, the priest. Okay? So these are all things that are going into this, but what then was left with the rest of it was yours to eat. And it wasn't just yours to eat, it was that you had the obligation to eat it, and you could eat it the first day or the second day, but the third day on it was considered unclean and it had to be burned by fire because it was, after all, a sacrifice. But it wasn't this complete giving over like the first two sacrifices. So you ate it there in the presence of the temple because that's where God was, and you had fellowship with God or peace with God. So the idea of this fellowship or this peace with God was everything is okay and I am at one with the Creator. Okay? Thoughts, comments, questions? What about what?
There are people with an outward appearance of cleanliness, righteousness, and I'm hiding things that no one else knows about.
Correct.
So, humanly, he's allowed to give this offering.
Mm-hmm.
But they're clean. So,
Okay.
is there anything that it gets about punishment or?
Okay, so Brad's point is pride is a sin, and a lot of times I will hide things, secret sins that you may not know about, and I may confess others that you may know about, and that's okay because you already know about them. I can confess those, but I'm not going to make myself more vulnerable. Or we tend to point at the Pharisees while we tend to act like the Pharisees. We point at the Pharisees and we condemn them. And so if somebody came in, and in this sin offering, that's the next offering that came before the peace offering, when you put your head on the hand of the animal, you are confessing the sin that you are seeking forgiveness for. Forgive me for my adultery. I am here because of embezzlement. I am here because of whatever. So now, presumably, that sacrifice is made, that sin is removed because the blood has been sprinkled, etc. So now, presumably, I'm clean. But your question is, if I'm still harboring this secret sin, I watch porn all day when the boss isn't there, then what is God's reaction? And my answer to you is, in the book of 1 Samuel, we meet a guy who was, he was literally the last of the judges of Israel. His name was Samuel. But the way that Samuel came to be that last judge of Israel was his predecessor Eli, who was high priest and a judge, had two sons who were born to the role named Hophni and Phinehas. And Hophni and Phinehas were called on the carpet, and God in 1 Samuel, I believe it's chapter 2, but I may be wrong, it may be chapter 3. He condemned them because in acting as the high priest in this sacrifice right here, this fellowship offering, this peace offering with God, rather than taking this part toward the altar and then taking that for their own, and this part toward God and taking it for their own, it says they would take whatever part they wanted because they disregarded the holiness of God. And God's judgment on them was that when they marched with the Ark of the Covenant of God into battle to represent God, they were struck dead. That was God's judgment according to, and I believe by now we're in 1 Samuel chapter 5. So it was something that God took very, very seriously. And in many other places, He condemns people for abusing this very specific particular offering. He did. He condemned Eli for allowing it. And yeah, so it wasn't something that was taken lightly. If I claim that I am in a state of sinfulness so as to be able to stand in the presence of a holy God and have fellowship with Him and dine with Him, then I better make sure that I can answer a clear conscience toward God. And the New Testament talks about the answer of a clear conscience before God. Just like in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, what does it say? Go ahead, look. It's okay. Revelation chapter, I think I'm telling you, I think it's Revelation chapter 3, verse 20. Jesus speaking to the church. And He brings up this exact image of this fellowship offering. Because remember, in this fellowship offering, there are several components. There's the king who's worthy of receiving my gift, who now is going to eat with me. We're going to eat a meal together and have fellowship together. Chapter 3, verse 20, I believe. And there's also the idea of this intercessory, the priest has to be involved. And then there's my part, this giving over of. So I'm bringing the sacrifice, which is going to be the meal, and we're going to be able to dine together in the presence of God, with God, to celebrate. And it is a celebration to celebrate that I have right standing with God. So, chapter 3, verse 20 of Revelation, does it say, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock"?
Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him, dine with him, eat with me.
Oh, wait a minute.
Fellowship.
Behold, Jesus speaking. Do you have a red letter edition? Do you have a red letter edition of the Bible? Okay. It's Jesus speaking. And Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock. If anyone will open the door, I will come in and eat with him and he with me." This is the picture right here. We will have fellowship because in order to be in the presence of royalty, I have to have right standing. Yes? That's the New Testament picture that God points back and harkens back to right here. But that's not the only place. That's not the only place. Give me just a second here while I consult my notes. Okay. If you would, we're going to start in the book of Matthew, let's look at Luke chapter 15. Luke chapter 15, if you would, please go ahead and turn there. Can anybody tell me what story is found in Luke chapter 15 that's a pretty familiar story? Lost sheep, another one too. Lost coin? And the prodigal son. Okay. So I'm going to do some speed reading. I know sometimes I kind of mumble when I do speed reading. I'm going to speed read Luke chapter 15 starting in verse 11, and we're going to go way down from there. So here we go. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I've sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Bring a ring and put it on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard the music and the dancing, so he called one of the servants, asked what was going on. Your brother's come home, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has made it back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in, so his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. You never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him? My son, the father said, you're always with me and everything I have is yours, but we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. Tell me, with Jesus speaking this parable, who did the father represent? God, or Jesus. Who did the young son represent? An impetuous young man? Me. Yeah, okay. In a nutshell, tell me, there was sin, yes? Rebellion that led to sin, that led to rock bottom, that led to repentance, that led to restoration, that led to a feast of fellowship together between the Father and the Son. Yes? To the Jewish mind that was listening to Jesus tell this parable, this was very, very, very much the fellowship offering in life form. Makes sense? And what about the brother? Did lead to resentment, but who was the brother? Fellow Christians, fellow believers. In this case, it would have been the Jews. Because remember, the only ones who could make a fellowship offering were those of a covenant relationship with God. So they were the fellow Jews who were now sitting there looking at us going, they don't deserve it. Okay. Flip over to Matthew chapter 22, please. This is the one I was going to start with. Are you all able to keep up with me when I do my speed reading? Or am I mumbling too much? My wife can't hear me when I talk anyway, so it doesn't matter. No. Whew. Boy, am I in trouble now. Okay. Matthew chapter 22. Anybody recognize here what's going on? Huh? Parable of the wedding feast. So what's the parable of the wedding feast about? Well, here we go. Going to do some more speed reading since nobody objected. Jesus spoke to them again in parable, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a king, that's royalty, right? Who prepared a wedding banquet for his son. He sent his servants to those who had been invited to the banquet to tell them to come, but they refused to come. Then he sent some more servants out, and he said, tell those who have been invited that I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and fattened cattle have been butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding banquet. But they paid no attention, and they went off, one to his field, another to his business. The rest seized the servants, mistreated them, and killed them. The king was enraged. He sent his army and destroyed those murderers and burned their city. Then he said to his servants, the wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not deserve to come. Go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find. So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all the people they could find, both good and bad, and the wedding hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to see the guest, he noticed a man there who was not wearing wedding clothes. Friend, he asked, how did you get in here without wedding clothes? The man was speechless. The king told the attendants, tie him hand and foot and throw him outside into the darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are invited, but few are chosen. Tell me, who was the king? Not a tough question. Come on. The King of Kings, God. Who were the invited guests? Oh, the Israelites. Who were those in the streets? And who was the one who was cast out? The one who was not properly attired in Christ, metaphorically. And what were they all there for? A feast. They weren't for the wedding, they were for the feast, although the wedding is implied. But they were there for the feast, this time of fellowship between the king and the commoner. Okay, well, let's do one more here. How about Luke chapter 14? Oh, that's John chapter 14. Helps if you're in the right book. Starting in verse 15. When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, Blessed is the man who will eat the feast in the kingdom of God. Jesus replied, A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent a servant to tell those who had been invited, Come, for everything is now ready. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, I've just bought a field and I must go and see it. Please excuse me. Another said, I've just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me. Still another said, I just got married, so I can't come. The servant came back and reported to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame. Sir, the servant said, What you have ordered has been done, but there is still room. Then the master told the servants, Go out to the roads and the country lanes and make them come in so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet. Tell me, are we starting to see some similarities? Story of the prodigal son, story of the wedding banquet, and now the story of this banquet. What was the king doing in every instance? Throwing a banquet. What else? Most easily seen in the prodigal son. In the 2 banquets, he was walking around the banquet hall saying, Where is everybody? In the case of the prodigal son, he's looking out the window. Where is he? In all 3 cases, what did the king do? Right? And for what purpose? A banquet, to have fellowship, to have communion, to have community. We get to be in the presence of the King of Kings when we are in right standing in His Son. Didn't have time to do this one justice. We may come back and revisit it again next time. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, or questions? All right. And that's where we'll leave it. Thank you.